Hey guys, so here are the notes for section 4.4. We're once again going to factor quadratics, but this is when a does not equal 1. So when we are going to factor quadratics when a does not equal 1, the very first thing you need to do is check to see if there's a common factor. Well, what does that mean? So you see where it says always check for a common factor, highlight that, circle that, do something so you remember that. Means you can take out a common number and/or a variable. So let's look at this example. We have 3x cubed minus 6x squared plus 27x. So let's see first if there's a number that all three have in common. Well, for 3, 6, and 27, they all have a 3 in common. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Now let's think about a variable. Well, the least amount of variable that they all have in common is an x. So now I'm going to go ahead and rewrite basically my trinomial here. Remember, what does trinomial mean? 3 terms. Okay, so with the numbers, you can divide. So 3 divided by 3, that gives us 1. Now, if I take an x out of the x cubed, basically that leaves me an x squared. Okay, what about negative 6 divided by 3? Well, that gives me negative 2. X squared divided by x, that gives me another x. Okay. And then we have positive 27 divided by 3. That gives me a 9. And then x divided by x, that is just a 1. So this is what I'm left with. After that, then you would decide, can I factor what's inside the parentheses a little bit more? In this case, we would not be able to. Okay, now let's go ahead and do some of the other problems. Okay, let's start off. So factor is possible. So our first one is 3x squared plus 20x minus 7. Okay, first thing you always need to check, is there a common factor? First, let's see if there's any numbers other than 1 that goes into 3, 20, and 7. Well, there aren't any numbers that 3, 20, and 7 have in common. What about a variable? Well, not all of them have a variable. Notice the 7 does not, so we cannot take an x out. So that means we just basically go to factoring. Now, what we did when a equaled 1, we went to the last number, or the constant, the last term, and decided all the numbers that multiply to it. For 7, we just have 1 and 7. But now that we have an a value other than 1, we also have to find the factors of that number. So that's going to be 1 and 3. What we're going to do is do a trial and error or guess and check type of method to factor this. Okay, I'm going to create my 2 sets of parentheses like you always should. Okay, now the nice part is since we only have one pairing, then this will work a lot easier. So I have to make sure I have a 1x and then a 3x. Because 1x and 3x, if we multiply these, this should give us 3x squared. And then 1 and 7 will be the same. So I have 1 and then 7. So make sure you separate them into each of the parentheses. Now, I'm going to multiply the inner. So 1 times 3x, that gives me 3x. And then I need to multiply the outer values, 1x times 7. What we are trying to do is if we get this 3x and 7x, will it add up to our middle term of 20x? Well, 3x and 7x, that will never add up to 20. So basically how we have our factoring does not work. Now, that doesn't mean this is not factorable. We actually have another option. What we can do is switch the 7 and the 1. So I'm going to do that. So instead of having the 1 in the first set of parentheses, I'm going to have the 7, and then 1 will be in the second set. So now let's go ahead and try this again to see what we get. Okay, 7 times 3x. Well, that gives me 21x. And then I do 1x times 1, that gives me just an x, or 1x. Now, if I see 21 and 1, and if I added or subtracted them, could I get to 20? Yes. Now, in order to get to 20, and notice the 20 is positive, my 21x has to stay positive, but my 1x is going to be negative, because 21 minus 1 gives us our 20. So that means 1x times negative 1, and then we'll have the positive 7 times 3x. And so therefore, our final answer, final factorization, is going to be 1x, or you could just write x, plus 7, and then 3x minus 1. And that would be our answer. So how we're going to factor all of these is trying to do this guess and check method. Okay, let's go ahead, let's try the next one. So when you're doing this, you might want to use a pencil, because if you try to do a pen, it's just going to be all scribbly everywhere. So use a pencil while you're doing this so you can erase here. Okay, we're going to do the same thing on the next one. We have 7x squared minus 20x minus 3. So we need to find the factors of our last term, so the constant 3, which is just 1 and 3. Find the factors of our first term, which is 7. So we have 1 and 7. Okay, we create two sets of parentheses, like we've done before. Okay, I have my 1x and 7x. Don't forget, separate them. Don't put them in the same set of parentheses, because then you're not going to be multiplying. Okay, and then I need 1 and 3. So now, here's my guess and check method. So I'm going to multiply the inner. 1 times 7x gives me 7x. 1x times 3 gives me 3x. I'm trying to add up in the middle for a negative 20x this time. So we think of 7 and 3 and added or subtracted them. Could we ever get to 20? No. So I'm going to go ahead and switch. And I like to switch my constants if possible. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my 1 and my 3. So I'm going to have 3 now in the first part of the parentheses and 1 in the last part. Okay, let's now remultiply. 3 times 7x gives us 21x, and x times 1 gives us 1x. So we added or subtracted 21x and 1x. Could we get 20x? Yes. Now notice this is a negative, okay? So what that means is that now our 21x needs to be also negative, because negative 21 plus 1 gives us that negative 20. So what this means is that we have to put the negative in front of the 3, and then we'll have a positive in front of the 1. So my final answer here is going to be x minus 3 and 7x plus 1. Now, I did get rid of that 1 in front of the x. It really doesn't matter if you have 1x or x. It's basically the same. The 1 is assumed that it's in front of it. Okay, I would like you guys to go ahead and pause the video and try the next one. Okay, let's see what you got. So here we have 3 for our constant and 3 from the top. So 1 times 3. Create two sets of parentheses. So I have 1x and 3x and 1 and 3. Okay, let's do some multiplication here. So 1 times 3x gives us 3x. And 1x times 3. So if I do 3x and 3x, will that ever give me 10x if I add or subtract? No. So I'm going to go ahead and switch. So I'm going to have 3, and then I'll have 1. Okay, so I do 3 times 3x gives me 9, and 1x times 1 gives me just an x. So if I added or subtracted 9x and 1x, could I get a negative or get a 10x? Yes. Now, in order to get that negative, both of these have to be, because negative 9 minus 1 gives us negative 10. So that means for both parentheses, they're going to be negatives. So my final answer here is x minus 3 and 3x minus 1. Now, some of you might see the patterns a little bit easier. So doing these, you might not have to do as many options, okay? Okay, so we're going to go ahead, I'm going to do another video, and we're going to do these other problems here. So make sure you watch part 2 of the 4.4 note.